I now call to speak Sandra Dangoor, who is our prospective parliamentary candidate.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. No, I'm not going to continue in French, don't worry. I was educated in London at a French school and thus consider myself to be a good European. However, I am very concerned at the speed at which we are being taken down the road to European integration. In my opinion, to have economic integration, one needs political integration. To have political integration, patriotism needs to disappear. How does a nation such as ours put aside over 1,000 years of history and culture? How can other European nations be expected to do the same? Differences do exist, and I, for one, value these differences. Vive la différence! I work in the city as a stockbroker. When companies are involved in takeovers and mergers, their board of directors call extraordinary general meetings, EGMs, to obtain their shareholders' approval. Several European countries, including the UK, are on the verge of the biggest merger of all time. What happened to our EGM? Has the board of directors of UK PLC, Her Majesty's government, called an EGM? No. Have these representatives elected by us, the shareholders, the tax-paying public, asked us for our approval? No. But I believe they have a moral duty to allow us a vote on such a critical issue, especially as they always disagree amongst themselves. Other countries have had their referenda. Why are we constantly being denied one here? We only want that to which we are entitled. Ladies and gentlemen, I say to you all today, let the people decide before it's too late. Thank you. John Taylor is our next speaker. An eminent QC who has been practicing at the bar for over 30 years, John is a former Conservative parliamentary candidate. His expertise is in the fields of parliamentary, local government, and planning and administrative law. He was asked by the Secretary of State for the Environment to conduct inquiries into the future of County Hall, which he did between 1989 and 1991. Through his work, he has had first-hand experience of the effect of European directives on the environment. He recently battled for and won the right for John Aspinall to continue caring for his animals at Howlett Zoo in the way he and his keepers have for years. This followed an action to restrict his keepers from entering the tigers' cages at Howlett's. The Referendum Party is delighted to have John Taylor QC as its candidate for Mid-Bedfordshire. Ladies and gentlemen, John Taylor.
In 1988 saw the tercentenary of the Glorious Revolution. That event in our history, which formed the modern constitutional framework through which the sovereignty of the British people has been expressed. The Crown in Parliament, as a concept of sovereignty, reconciled the conflicting purposes of the needs of order and defence and the rights of the people of this land to their freedom under law. This notion embodied the essential sovereignty of the British state, And just as the freedoms through Parliament were won with struggle, the people of our nation have defended through generations the integrity and existence of this way of ordering our affairs. The English people, through the Crown in Parliament, has possessed legislative sovereignty, the right to decide what laws shall govern us, economic sovereignty, the right to make decisions about how our economy shall be run, territorial sovereignty, the control over our frontiers, over our relations with other states, and finally the sovereign right to defend ourselves when our freedom and national interests have been threatened. Through the long process of the attempts made to join the European Economic Community, as it then was, from 1961 to 1972, government constantly assured the nation that the essential sovereignty enjoyed by the people of this country over our affairs would be no more constrained than by other treaties, save in relation to those areas where the object of the Treaty of Rome was to secure a single market. There were, as we can now see, many voices more percipient: Enoch Powell and Douglas Jay, to name but two. Who saw that the powers conferred by the treaty on its institutions and their prospective exercise in Britain were a potent threat to the sovereignty of the Crown in Parliament and the principles of representative government. Inexorably, in the years since our accession, these powers have grown. The market has been transmuted, aiming for deeper integration, and the EEC has changed into the European Union. The consequence has been an erosion of our right to run our affairs and direct impacts on our way of life, which most of us did not conceive those many years ago when the country acceded to the treaty. The sovereignty of Crown in Parliament has been eroded, the institutions of our government subordinated to the interests and desires of those who do not represent us and have their own ends to serve. Already after Maastricht, and before the Intergovernmental Conference now being set up, in wide areas Britain is no longer a sovereign state. No power resides in our elected members in Parliament to act for our interests and those they represent on matters where a European law prevails. As the High Court has pointed out, the treaty is the supreme law of this country, taking precedence over acts of Parliament. In this respect, it can be said that given the manner in which the European Court itself has enhanced the status of community law, as far as its own legal system is concerned, the community now possesses most of the characteristics of a federation. Recently, Parliament and government has found itself powerless to prevent Spanish owners of fishing vessels from registering as British vessels for the purpose of sharing the British fish quota, putting at risk the livelihoods of fishermen here. And the House of Lords has been compelled to accept, in the Factotum No. 3 case, that the supremacy of Parliament to legislate has been abrogated where the law of the community prevails. Parliament is no longer sovereign. At the time of our joining the market, the EEC was seen as a single market trading area to which it was to our advantage to have access. The federalist designs of the original sponsors which have progressively come to view, were not put to the British people. Indeed, the Conservative White Paper of 1970 blandly stated that there would be no question of any erosion of essential national sovereignty. Perhaps the country should have been reminded that Bismarck began the unification of Germany with a Zollverein or customs union, and that the interstate commerce clause of the American Constitution, by which the founding fathers sought to ensure that trade between states was free and unhindered, has probably been the most potent single agency in permitting the federal government to erode the rights of states in the American Union. So with Europe. The institutions of the community, in pursuit of establishing the single market, have probed ever deeper into our national life. As stage has succeeded stage, the scope of community interests has been extended. From a common market where goods, persons, services and capital could circulate freely through the Singular European Act of 1986 to the Maastricht Treaty of 1991, the reach of European institutions has grown and its impact on sovereignty fructified. The Singular European Act of 1986 added to the competence of the institutions of the community. The list of activities increased from 11 to 20, including environmental protection. In all these spheres, the operation of community law is preeminent. The treaty does not, for example, allow Britain to have its own voice in international trade negotiations, impinging thus on the right of the Crown in relation to foreign affairs to pursue the national interest. Britain had no independent voice at the GATT negotiations. Already in the context of the Singular European Act, the object of monetary union was promulgated, but the Maastricht Treaty has made that objective central. The preamble of the treaty specifically provides that the signatories resolved to, quote, to achieve the strengthening and convergence of their economies and to establish an economic and monetary union, including, in accordance with the provisions of the treaty, a single and stable currency. The Maastricht Treaty, moreover, sought to extend the common goals and policies to, again to quote, a common foreign and security policy, including the framing of a common defence policy, to justice and home affairs, and to promote economic and social progress within the context of the accomplishment of the external market and of reinforced cohesion and environmental protection. The European Union has thus moved on, the aims touching every aspect of state sovereignty. The crucial element, however, in this progress, and of the deepest concern to every British subject, must be the objective of economic union and a single currency. Karl Marx is now discredited, but he had two sound ideas, one borrowed from the German philosopher Hegel, and the other more or less his own, namely that the economic functioning of a society and its economic relationships determined the superstructure of the state, its institutions, and where power was to be found. The message for monetary union is pellucidly clear. Once economic and financial policy is in the hands of the community institutions and run by the European Monetary Institute or its successor, the European Central Bank, effective power will have gone from the Crown in Parliament and will render the role of Parliament in these matters no more effective than that of some local authority. Fiscal policy, borrowing, economic management will all be in the hands of others in a structure markedly undemocratic and unresponsive to the needs of the people of this country. In the reality of a European affairs, that means control by the Franco-German hegemony. Ever since the cooperation of de Gaulle and Adenauer, Franco-German interdependence has been the essential element in Europe. And there is no doubt today which country is the laurel to the other's hardy. As Chancellor Kohl said in 1995, united Germany is the number one in Europe. Our leading role is there, not because we have sought it, but because it is a fact. Britain has no permanent partner and always has to rely on a shifting coalition to support its aims. Government is apt to say that it wishes to be at the heart of a Europe. In the real heart, there is no room. Although, as Norman Lamont has said, Britain is sometimes allowed, like a child, to put its hands on the steering wheel of the car for a short time. In that context, how real will prove the ability of our government to defend the economic interests of the nation? The sovereignty of the British state will be gone wholly, partially eclipsed already by the need to cooperate in economic matters and to treat the exchange rate policy as a matter of common interest. Progress to monetary union would reduce financial autonomy to a narrow sphere. A single currency implies, should Britain not exercise the opt-out, to quote, member nations transferring their sovereignty over financial and wage policies, as well as in monetary affairs, to the European Union institutions. As the governor of the German central bank has said, it is an illusion to think that states can hold on to their autonomy over tax policies. The essence of representative government in Britain, that only the nation, through its elected parliament, can agree to taxation, would suffer a greater blow than that which any Stuart king was able to deliver, and the rights won in the 17th century would be irrevocably diminished. But the Maastricht Treaty goes beyond mere monetary and economic union. A common foreign and security policy is established, and Britain is committed to establishing systematic cooperation in the conduct of policy with other member states and to implementing joint action. There is now pressure to bring the common foreign and security policy within the sphere of legally binding obligations. Maastricht further introduced obligations to cooperate in the sphere of justice and home affairs. Areas of common interest include asylum policy, rules governing persons crossing the frontiers of member states, immigration policy regarding nationals of third countries, and various activities concerned with drug trafficking, international fraud and other crimes. As in the sphere of foreign and security policy, the Commission wishes also to see justice and home affairs made subject to the legal framework. This would extend significantly the reach of community law beyond the realm of business and economics, limiting the sovereignty of the Crown in Parliament. In the years and through the treaties, the European Union has advanced significantly towards a structure of federalism, with constant encroachment on the residual powers of the member states. Every federal structure needs a Supreme Court. The European Court of Justice was put in place to fulfil that role. Article 164 gave the Court the duty of interpreting the EC Treaty according to law. Like the United States Supreme Court, it has followed an inevitable logic which leads it to the interpretation of the treaty constitution according to the spirit of the treaty rather than the letter. Powers have been extended, and the judgments are, just as in America, often political. There lies, therefore, at the heart of the Union a legal entity with a mission to further that union and enlarge its power, to deepen it. This Court, combined with the elected Parliament and its increased powers, the institution of qualified majority voting, the supremacy of community law, and the extension of the competence of the Union, has all created and will create in substance, as well as in law, a substantial erosion of British sovereignty. The Intergovernmental Conference about to be convened will seek the enlargement of the powers of the Union, a downgrading of the right of veto, and further moves to a more integrated state. At no time have the people of Britain been asked whether this union accords with their wishes. We entered an association of sovereign states in a common trading market. We are now a union which is being pressed to federation. That union, according to Chancellor Cole, is irreversible. It is forever. The people of this country, generation upon generation, struggled to secure their right to representative government in Parliament. They have never been asked whether they wish their freely won rights and liberties to be vested in the institutions of an undemocratic superstate. The people of this country have lived long under a system of law which has borne upon them lightly, staunchly rejecting the imposition of bureaucratic regulation. They have never been asked whether they wish to have the system of the common law replaced by the all-encompassing Napoleonic machinery of the continental state. The people of this country, down the centuries, have fought to preserve their liberties and sovereign state from the threats of overmighty continental powers. They have never been asked whether they wish to turn their back upon this history and merge themselves in a superstate under Franco-German hegemony. None of these questions have been asked of them. Government has indeed consistently sought to evade the questions posed during the process of integration and has avoided seeking the views of the ordinary men and women of our nation. They have brought about a revolution in our Constitution, but an inglorious revolution made without the people's consent. That stand needs to be challenged, and the people should be asked these questions. A referendum is required, and we should be asked whether it is our wish to remain a sovereign state, governed in liberty by the Crown in Parliament.